My name is Gregory, and this happened last December when I was home alone in my house for a whole week. My girlfriend had gone to stay with her parents for the holidays, and I stayed behind because of work. I live in a quiet neighborhood in a small town in upstate New York. The houses are pretty spaced out, and most of the people on my block go away for Christmas, so I basically had the whole street to myself. At first, I liked the idea of the peace and quiet. I thought I would get a lot of rest, maybe catch up on some shows, and just enjoy the coziness of the holidays for a bit. What happened that week still lives rent-free in my head. It was my second night alone. It was around 6:30, and it was already completely dark outside. It had been snowing lightly all day, and there was a white layer covering my yard and driveway. I was in the kitchen making a simple dinner, just pasta and chicken. Usually, my girlfriend is the one who cooks our meals. I'm not much of a chef. I turned on the TV in the background to make the house feel less empty, because as much as I liked having the place to myself, I wasn't used to it being so quiet. While I was eating at the table, I heard something unusual. It took me a second to figure out what it was. It sounded like singing. I muted the TV and listened. The sound was definitely coming from outside. The singing got a little clearer, and I realized the person was singing Jingle Bells. At first, I thought maybe some neighborhood kids were playing around, but the voice didn't sound like a kid. It sounded like a grown man. I got up and walked toward the front door, because that seemed like the direction it was coming from. The closer I got, the louder it became. By the time I reached the door, it sounded like the singing was coming from right on my front stoop. My stomach dropped, but at that moment, I still thought maybe it was just a caroler. I opened the door, and standing in the glow of my porch light was a man around 35 years old. He wore no hat, and his coat looked way too thin for the weather. But the strangest thing was that he was completely focused on singing Jingle Bells, staring down at my welcome mat like he wasn't even aware that I had opened the door. I remember forcing a small smile because I didn't really know what else to do. I had never gotten Christmas carolers before, and even then, I'd never heard of a grown man doing it alone. It's usually a group thing. From what I could tell, he didn't look dangerous. He just looked confused, maybe slow. I even wondered if he was special needs or something, because he didn't react to me being there at all. He just kept singing. When he finished the song, I expected him to say something or at least leave, but instead, he took a breath and started singing Jingle Bells all over again from the beginning, in the same slow, off-key tone. This time, though, he was looking up at me, making direct eye contact. My smile dropped. Now it was just weird. I stood there for another minute, pretending to listen even though I was uncomfortable. I kept thinking he would stop after the second run, but he didn't. He just looped the song. I checked my phone and realized almost 4 minutes had passed while he sang Jingle Bells over and over again. Finally, I decided it was enough. I thanked him in a polite tone and slowly closed the door, thinking that would send him on his way. But once the door was closed, I still heard the singing. It didn't even slow down. I walked back to the table and sat down, trying to ignore it, but the longer it went on, the harder it was to ignore. The man didn't seem normal, and it bothered me that he was still standing right outside my door, singing the same song. I wondered if maybe someone was out there with him, like a caretaker waiting by the street, but I didn't see anyone else. It made the whole house feel uncomfortable, like someone was standing way too close to my personal space. I kept eating, but I couldn't focus on the food. The singing went on for my entire dinner. Finally, after about 10 minutes straight, the singing stopped. The sudden silence actually made me jump. I got up slowly and walked back to the front door window. When I looked outside, I expected the man to be gone, but he was still there. He had moved. Now he was standing at the end of my driveway, facing my house, completely still. He wasn't singing anymore. He was just standing there in the snow, staring at my door. Something about that felt worse than the singing. He looked like he was waiting. I opened the door just a crack and told him he couldn't be there, that this was private property and he needed to leave. He didn't move at all. The whole thing felt unnatural. I finally told him that if he didn't leave, I would call the police. Then I shut the door again. I watched him from the window for another minute, but he didn't budge. I didn't actually want to call the cops because I thought maybe something was mentally wrong with him, and I didn't want to make things worse. Instead, I went upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and tried to relax. Before changing into bedclothes, I checked the window upstairs. The man was gone from the driveway. Thank God. I figured the threat had worked. I got into bed, turned on a lamp, and started reading to wind down. About 20 minutes later, I heard something from behind the house. I instantly knew what it was. Unfortunately, it was the same man singing Jingle Bells again, this time from my backyard. I jumped out of bed and went to the back window. When I looked down, not only was he clearly visible in my backyard, he was already looking up at my window. The man was standing directly below my bedroom window, in the snow, staring straight at me while he sang. I slid open the window and yelled that I was calling the police. The singing stopped instantly. He stood there in total silence for about 3 seconds, then suddenly burst into a full sprint toward the back door on the lower level. The second he was out of my view, I heard the most insane sound I've ever heard in my life. He started screaming at the top of his lungs. Not like a normal scream, it sounded like a death metal singer, but even more unhinged and deranged. It echoed across the yard and through the entire house. Then came the banging. The back door shook violently as he kicked it, slammed into it, and probably tried ripping the doorknob off. I felt the vibrations from the impacts in my upstairs bedroom. I realized this guy wasn't just weird, he was trying to get inside. I grabbed my phone and called 911 right away. I begged them to hurry, telling them a man was trying to break in. I stayed on the line while holding a baseball bat in my other hand and backed into my bedroom closet, shutting myself inside. The operator told me to stay hidden. I could still hear the screams and the banging from downstairs. Every second felt like he was going to break through. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the banging stopped. Everything went silent except for my breathing. I didn't know if he left or if he had gotten inside. I stayed completely still in the closet until the police arrived. They checked the entire outside of the house and confirmed that the back door was still locked. The operator said I could come out and meet them. When I stepped outside to greet them, I finally felt like I could breathe again. We walked around the backyard and saw deep footprints in the snow showing exactly where he had stood while singing to me through the window and where he had run up to the back door. The footprints then led off into the woods behind my property. The cops followed the trail a little bit but came back, saying it wasn't worth going deep into the woods at night. They acted like it wasn't a big deal. They told me people act strange all the time and that as long as I kept my doors locked, I should be fine. They didn't seem very interested in finding him, and that bothered me a lot, but I was too shaken up to argue. After they left, the house felt horribly empty and cold. I kept every door and window locked and double-checked them over and over. At that point, I was over the alone time and just wanted my girlfriend back home. I went down to my parents' place for Christmas Eve and Christmas. Thankfully, as far as that man goes, he never returned. At least, not that I know of. This story is about my Christmas experience from about 10 years ago. I was 6 years old, since my birthday was in November and I had just finished celebrating. Now we were getting ready for the holidays. My birthday celebration happened on the same day as the famous Odell Beckham Jr. catch. I lived with Cowboys fans, but I was a Giants fan. I remember it being talked about for the rest of the night, even during my birthday celebration. It was an eventful birthday week, and I'm surprised I remember all of this since I was only 6. I didn't understand football, but I understood that the catch was crazy, so I was just living in the moment and happy. It was my birthday, like any other kid. For my birthday, I got tickets to the Mavs vs. Wizards NBA game on December 30th. I was a Cavaliers fan, but since we lived outside of Dallas, I knew a lot of Mavs fans. I was a small fan myself, so I was grateful it was going to be my first NBA game. Christmas Day was 5 days before, and I got a brand new Odell Beckham Jr. jersey and a Maverick shirt and sweatshirt as I was becoming a sports fan. I had a great Christmas, but one of my Christmas gifts was another Mavs game on December 27th against the Oklahoma City Thunder. I was so excited to go to both games. The day came and we went to the game. The Mavs won a close one, something like 112-105. It was crazy to see an event like that in an NBA arena for the first time. We left the game and drove home, which was maybe 45 minutes away from the American Airlines Center. The next couple of days were normal, but I was excited to go back to that amazing stadium and atmosphere. We went again, not knowing it would be the last time I'd go for years. At the first game, we had great seats, about 7 rows from the court in the middle. This time, we were around row 20 in a corner area, so the experience was different. The game was going well, and I was enjoying it. The Mavs were killing them by 20 to 30 points at halftime. Since I was a child, I wanted to roam around, get food, and go to the bathroom by myself. But I was with my parents and only 6 years old. So we walked to get some food. We waited in line for about 20 minutes. My dad went to another stand, and I stayed with my brother who was waiting to pay. While we were talking to the worker, I walked away to throw out some candy at a trash can about 30 feet away. As I got there, a tall white man came up to me and asked, "Hey, are you lost?" I shook my head and didn't say anything. He said he didn't see my parents and told me we should go look. He grabbed my hand, and because I was just a kid, I went with him. He took me toward the nosebleeds and said we were going to the intercom so they could announce my name and my parents. I said okay and kept walking. We got to the top and waited for about 10 minutes. When the area cleared out, he tried pushing me toward the emergency stairs or elevator. I don't remember exactly which, but I remember there was no one around. Then I remembered stranger danger. The fear and guilt started sinking in. I realized I shouldn't go with this man. He didn't have any credentials. When he let go of my hand to check his phone, I ran all the way back toward the stands. As I ran, I saw him standing there with a small grin on his face. I couldn't find my parents, but I didn't care. I just wanted to be somewhere safe. I found my brother, who hadn't told my parents he lost me because he didn't want to get in trouble. He asked if I was okay, and I said yes, choosing not to say anything. The game ended and the Mavs won, but I didn't care. I just wanted to go home. As we left, I was quiet. In the car, I was quiet too. My parents noticed and seemed confused, but I told them I was tired. As we drove home, I almost fell asleep when a loud honk suddenly screeched behind us. It was so loud I almost screamed. I turned around, and there he was, the same man driving a truck with maybe 3 other men inside. I couldn't tell who they were, just silhouettes. My parents yelled at them when they pulled up next to us, but the men just stared. I wanted to say something so badly, but for some reason, I didn't. When we got home, I went straight to sleep. In the middle of the night, I woke up with chills. I noticed a light flashing at my window. I looked out, expecting something innocent, maybe Santa Claus or something, but instead I saw that man standing there, shining a flashlight into my bedroom window. I screamed and ran to my parents' room, telling them someone was at my window. They rushed outside and searched for about 20 minutes but didn't find anything. Since I was a kid, they didn't believe me. They said it must have been a car's shadow, but I know what I saw. A few days later, on New Year's Eve, we were staying up to watch the ball drop. With about 5 or 6 minutes left until midnight, the doorbell rang. My parents answered it. I didn't pay attention until I heard the man's voice, and I was 100% sure it was him. I told my parents everything, including how he took me to the upper level at the game and how I escaped. They still didn't believe me. They said it was just a man handing out lost dog flyers for his cousin's dog. The night went on, and everything seemed fine. But a year later, on New Year's Eve, there was a knock at my bedroom window. I had forgotten about the situation by then. I got up and looked, and there was a piece of paper stuck to the glass. It said, "This new year, you'll meet me again." I gave my parents the note and they filed the report. But they never heard anything back. Every couple of years I get terrified of New Year's Eve thinking that man will come back. I told my parents I never want to go back to an NBA game, saying it wasn't my thing. But now I'm 16 and it scares me that the man knows where I live. I'm considering going to the Cavs versus Mavs game on January 2nd or 3rd, which would be my first game since then, but I'm not sure. This experience scared me away from basketball and made me always close my curtains. I remember this night way too clearly, and even now I think about how close my family came to something really terrible. It was early December, and we decided to drive up north into the mountains to cut down a real Christmas tree. It was something my wife Marianne and I always wanted to do, and our 7-year-old son Andrew was excited about it too. The weather was cold and cloudy, and the sky had that heavy look where it feels like snow is always about to fall again. To us, that added to the Christmas vibe. The whole ride up the winding roads made me feel like a kid again. It had been a while since I'd done something this unique and in the Christmas spirit, and having Andrew so excited about it just brought me back to my youth. When we finally reached the remote area Marianne found online, there were no other cars around in the parking area. There were a bunch of light posts scattered around, so we weren't in pitch-black darkness. That's why we picked the place. Still, we did bring flashlights. We parked by a small unmarked path that led deeper into the trees. There was a lot of snow on the ground still from the snowfall we got a few days earlier, and up this high, the snow took even longer to melt. Andrew jumped out of the car right away and started throwing snowballs at us. So I started throwing them back. We were here to have fun, so of course I was going to try to make it as memorable as possible for Andrew. I grabbed our flashlights and the axe that I planned to use to chop down a tree. We walked up the narrow path with snow crunching under our boots. Andrew kept running ahead, stopping to point at trees he thought might be perfect. The deeper we went, the more the road behind us disappeared, and the only light came from the faint moon glowing behind the thick clouds. It was so quiet that I even asked Marianne and Andrew to stop for a second just to really take it in. There was not a single sound, maybe a light breeze. That was it. To be honest, if I had been there alone, I'd have been slightly creeped out just from the silence and darkness as we walked deeper onto the trail. We had to use the flashlights all three of us brought. Andrew was having a lot of fun with his flashlight until the light from the parking lot was no longer visible and we were basically in total darkness outside of the flashlights. He started to get a little nervous, asking how far we were going to go and making comments on the darkness. I kept feeling like someone was watching us or like something was walking behind us, but every time I turned around there was nothing but the empty snow path. About 10 minutes in, we finally found a spot where the trees were tall and full. Andrew ran around them in circles looking for the best one. Marianne stayed closer to me and whispered that she wanted to pick a tree fast. Because she had a weird feeling too, I got exactly what she meant. This was a lot creepier than I had imagined. Right then, I heard soft crunching behind us. It wasn't any of us, nor was it an animal. It sounded like boots crunching in the snow, but very slowly, sneaking. When I turned around, I saw a man in dark clothes standing about 20 feet back on the path. He wasn't dressed for the weather. His hands were bare and red from the cold, and his jacket looked more like a windbreaker. His face looked pale and stiff, like he'd been out in the cold for way too long. Marianne grabbed Andrew's arm to pull him closer. When the man noticed we were looking at him, he suddenly smiled in an off-putting way and stepped closer. He asked if we were looking for a Christmas tree. His voice, breaking the already unsettling silence, was uncomfortable. His voice was deep and kind of soft. Before I could say anything, Andrew answered yes, excited again, and I felt a jolt of panic because I didn't want this man knowing anything about us. Marianne quickly told him no, that we were just walking. The man stepped closer. Again. And the way he moved made every hair on my arms stand up. He told us not to worry because he wasn't a park ranger. He said it like he could tell exactly why we lied, because admittedly what we were doing was super illegal. I didn't want to talk to him at all. Something was wrong with him. He looked hungry or desperate, like he hadn't slept in days. For lack of a better word, he looked homeless. I told Marianne we should head back to the car, and she nodded, gripping Andrew's jacket. When we started walking past the man, he stood by, smiling and watching, giving slight nods as if to say goodbye. As we walked, Andrew kept turning around, asking if the man was following. We told him to stay facing forward. Every time I looked back, the man was a little bit closer than before, even though I didn't hear him speed up. I whispered to Marianne that when we reached the main road, we had to run to the car. She held Andrew's hand tighter and nodded without looking back. The man's steps stayed behind us the whole time, dragging a little, like his boots were too big or too heavy. Once we got close enough to see the gap in the trees where the car was parked, I told them to go. Marianne lifted Andrew and ran as fast as she could. The only reason I felt even remotely safe was because of the axe in my hand. But I'm not a violent person, and I've never had to resort to violence in my entire life. I turned around to block the path behind us for even just a second. The man had stopped walking and was just staring at me. He put his hands up halfway, still smiling, and said, "I mean no harm. Why don't you get back to your truck now?" My heart skipped a beat as he said this. He said truck like he knew where. Came in a pickup truck. I replied back simply that we didn't want any trouble. Then I turned and started hurrying back down to the lot. But halfway there, Marianne screamed my name, sounding panicked. Oh no, I thought. When I got to the truck, she showed me that both right side tires were punctured. I didn't have time to examine it long enough to realize it was him. I told Marianne to call 911 immediately, but she struggled to find service at first. She walked around the snowy lot for a bit until there was reception. She never strayed too far away. I had Andrew wait in the truck, who was now clearly concerned as he watched Marianne and me freaking out. He was old enough to know something bad was happening. Marianne seemed to be having a hard time on the phone, so I took it and explained our location and that we felt threatened by a random man in the woods who may have been responsible for the tires. Given the potentially unstable individual in the vicinity and the fact that we had a child with us, the police were taking this very seriously. They told me to keep my family locked in the truck until police arrived and that a tow truck would be sent as well. I was instructed to keep the operator on the line while we waited, but eventually the line started getting choppy, cutting out at moments because of the poor reception. Then Marianne suddenly screamed in my ear to look and pointed toward the tree line. By the path we had been on, there were multiple people standing just beyond the trees. I counted at least 3. They looked like shadows from where we were, which made the sight even more terrifying. It was like we were being stalked and hunted. Then 2 of the people started walking closer. I told the operator, and she said something that really made me uncomfortable. She asked if I had any kind of weapons, and when I said I had the axe, she implied that if it came down to it, I should use it to defend my family. By this point, Andrew was crying, and Marianne tried to calm him down. I told the operator that 2 of the figures were still walking toward the truck. They weren't running or yelling or anything. They just walked very slowly, like they knew we weren't going anywhere. The 3rd figure strangely disappeared, likely backing deeper into the woods away from the light. The operator told me the police were close, but I had no idea if that meant 2 minutes or 10. I kept looking back and forth between the tree line and the road in the distance, praying to see flashing lights. I tried to talk to the operator again, but the call dropped the second it cut off. Everything felt 100 times worse. I locked the doors again, even though they were already locked. I kept my hand on the axe, gripping it so hard my knuckles hurt. As the 2 people were now close enough for us to hear them speak, we heard them saying, "We're here to help," as they waved their hands in the air. We didn't recognize either of them as the man from earlier. "Do you think they're park rangers?" Marianne asked. I said firmly, "Not a chance." But perhaps I said it too loudly, because Andrew started crying even harder, and Marianne had to try extra hard to console him. The 2 people approaching were dressed similarly to the first guy, way underdressed. Their clothes looked worn out, almost dirty, and they didn't seem bothered by the cold at all. Then, seemingly randomly, the 2 of them turned around and started running back in the direction they had come from. We didn't know why just yet, but it soon became clear. Never have we been so ecstatic to hear the sound of police sirens. They grew louder fast, and eventually we saw flashing lights coming down the road. Coming pretty fast, actually. The police SUV entered the lot with its spotlight on and instantly shined it in our direction. I flashed my lights to try to get the officers to see the men running back into the woods. At that point they were nearly gone, but their footprints weren't. Once the SUV was next to us, 2 officers jumped out immediately with flashlights drawn. I got out and practically dropped to my knees thanking them, pointing in the direction the men had run. "They disappeared into the trees," I said. Like they had rehearsed where to go, they vanished. The police told us to stay inside the truck while they searched, and more units showed up within minutes. 1 officer stayed with us. Andrew was no longer scared, but instead excited by the commotion and the sight of police officers. After a long search, the police came back and told us what I already knew they were going to say. They didn't find anyone, just tracks in the snow that went deep into the woods and eventually spread out in different directions. They didn't know if the people lived out there or if they were part of some kind of camp deeper in the mountains. They said sometimes drifters or squatters stay hidden in remote areas during the winter. The tow truck eventually arrived, and the police stayed with us the entire time until our truck was loaded. We had to sit in the back of a patrol car to stay warm while everything was finished. No one really said much. Marian held Andrew in her lap, and I stared out the window, watching the dark tree line, half expecting to see someone standing there again. On the ride back home, none of us talked. It felt like saying anything out loud would make it real again. We never tried to cut down a Christmas tree again. We didn't even go back to that mountain area. Even now, 10 years later, I refuse to go anywhere near it. What scares me the most is the thought that they had been watching us long before we ever noticed them. They saw us arrive in that parking lot. They knew to strand us by slashing my tires. They waited for us to go deep enough into the trees so we wouldn't make it back to the truck. We were lucky we trusted our instincts and decided to leave almost right away. We were lucky I was holding an axe, which may have dissuaded them from doing something worse. I don't like thinking about how close we came to never going home. I still think about this one night from when I was 9 years old. It was a few days before Christmas. My parents both had things to do that night, and since I was almost 9, they felt okay leaving me home alone for a little while. My mom had to run to the grocery store for Christmas dinner supplies, and my dad was working late like he usually did in December. I was sitting on the couch watching a Christmas movie and eating cookies by the fireplace, with the Christmas tree lit up. It was already dark even though it was still relatively early, and I remember the Christmas lights flashing across the street. Everything was normal, until the doorbell rang. The only reason this caught my attention was because it was late and random, and my mom always told me never to answer the door when I was alone. My parents never rang the doorbell since they had keys. I got up and walked to the door anyway because I wanted to look through the peephole. When I looked through it, I saw a man standing on the porch wearing a Santa Claus suit. The full thing, the red coat, the hat, the beard, everything. But he didn't look like a friendly Santa. He wasn't holding anything except what looked like a clipboard, and he was standing way too close to the door, like he was waiting for me to unlock it. I didn't know what to say at first, so I whispered, "Who is it?" The man leaned closer to the door, like he was trying to see through the peephole or hear me better. In that moment, he realized I was a kid. He put on his best Santa voice and said he was Santa, that he had gifts for me, and that I should open the door. At 9 years old, I wasn't stupid. I didn't believe in Santa anymore. My parents had taught me about strangers. I told him to go away and that I didn't need anything. I tried to sound brave, but my voice cracked. The man went silent for a second, then asked if I was home alone. As soon as he said that, I knew I had messed up. I didn't answer him. I walked away from the door and went back to the living room, suddenly too scared to stand near it. I sat on the couch clutching a pillow, staring at the TV like acting normal would make the fear go away. Then I heard the doorknob twist. He was testing to see if it was locked. I wanted to scream, but no one was home. A moment later, I heard another sound, from the back door. He was trying that one too. I realized my house only had 2 doors, and he was trying both of them. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the phone, and called my mom. When she answered, I talked fast, trying not to cry. I told her someone was trying to get into the house and that he was dressed like Santa. My mom got serious immediately and told me she was coming home right now and that I was not to open any doors no matter what. She told me to stay in the living room and keep the curtains closed. I sat on the floor behind the couch where I couldn't be seen from the windows and stayed completely still. I kept hearing faint noises outside, footsteps, light taps, signs that someone was still there. Eventually the noises stopped. Not long after, I heard a car pull into the driveway. I recognized the sound of my mom's brakes. I stayed where I was until I heard the front door unlock and open. My mom rushed in, breathing hard, grocery bags still in her hands. She locked the door behind her and called my name, and I ran to her immediately. She hugged me and told me she had just seen a man dressed as Santa walking down our street. She said she slowed her car and yelled at him, asking what he was doing. He told her he was going door to door asking for donations, but she didn't believe him for a second. She said he looked nervous and walked away quickly. She told me she was proud of me for not opening the door and for calling her right away. She called the police and reported the man. We never found out if he was arrested or if he disappeared into the neighborhood. 2 neighbors later said the man had knocked on their doors asking for donations and that it felt like a scam. Regardless, he had tried to get into our house, knowing a little boy was home alone. I still think about that night every year around Christmas when I see Santa decorations. I remember being 9 years old and knowing that man on our porch was not Santa, and that he wanted something else. I was lucky the doors were locked and my mom got home when she did. What could have happened if that door had been unlocked is terrifying to think about.